Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and in this video we're going to take a look at Dynasty Warriors Origins, specifically the demo, which is available on Steam and consoles right now. This is the Steam version I'll be talking about. Quick background, have I played DW? Yeah, I've played DW, I played all of them. I have an unhealthy amount of knowledge about Three Kingdoms. So let's look at the positives, negatives, and other bits. Starting with the negatives so we can end on a positive note, how about that? So, negatives. Most of these actually are more subjective than objective. Big one for me, and seems to be quite common, at least at some of the forums I've looked at, is the fact that Origins has a set character. It's a strange decision, given that Dynasty Warriors has historically been a series with an extremely large roster of characters. Everyone has their favourite character, and the characters themselves are a big part of the appeal. Given how many there are and the nature of the game, it isn't like Dynasty Warriors have had super deep characters, but they had their unique designs, gameplays, and gimmicks. Now in Origins we have a new original character with amnesia that we name and play as. There's a chance this will end up being a character from Three Kingdoms, like the Ahua, but for right now it's a purely original character who will witness the events through. I don't like that personally, but I can see why they've done it too. Related to this is the largely reduced roster. You can play as other characters in the demo temporarily, maybe more permanently in a free mode in the final game, but there's only really a handful of them. There's 9 of them, I think, 3 from each kingdom. Maybe there'll be Lubu, judging from the fact that he seems to have a moveset. Fundamentally, what this means is that we're gonna have about 9 weapons, 9 movesets. That sounds like a tiny number, even if we look at the last Dynasty Warriors 9, which had like 90. I didn't enjoy 9, so I didn't play it much. Might have had some clones, I honestly don't remember. That said, there's Warriors Origin 3 and 4, which both have over 100 unique movesets. That said, whilst we have a greatly reduced number of movesets, they are a little more fleshed out, and we'll touch more on that in a moment, but each weapon has its own unique thing this time. Those are my main issues with Origins demo. Set character which goes against series tradition and spirit, in my opinion, and vastly reduced options for movesets, characters, and weapons, in terms of quantity. So now let's move on to the not sures, and that is the general gameplay feel. The camera felt strange to me in the demo. Perhaps it was too close, too low angled, too off center, but there were a few times I felt as if the camera were impeding my enjoyment, or at least my ability to play, getting in the way. What I say about cameras in video games, if you notice it, then it's not doing its job. The camera should never really be noticed, because you should be focused on the action the camera is pointed at. I really hope they include, in the final game, some camera options such as distance, elevation, height, that sort of stuff, especially given how important it is now to keep your eyes on the enemy generals. Another issue that isn't exactly a negative in so many words, but something I've been thinking about: multiplayer. DW is a series that's had, traditionally, a lot of multiplayer. It's never been a focus, but it's always been there in some form, I feel like. At least since 3. Maybe, I don't know if 6 had multiplayer. If it did, it was probably just split screen, but again, I didn't like 6, so I didn't play it much. Multiplayer is a lot of fun in these titles. I would like to see it return in the final product, in some form. Finally, there's the price. The game is expensive on the store right now, which isn't really to do with the game itself, but it's the barrier of entry, and I think it's worth noting. Now let's get to the positives. A lot of issues that people have brought up with prior DW games have actually been addressed here. Now again, I don't know if it's enough to make people who didn't like the series get into it, but before I get into those, I want to touch on PC performance. I played the demo without any upscaling the first time. Set the FPS to 60, max settings 1440p, volumetrics off, as I don't like fog in most games. For me, game ran just fine. I then played it again, and I set the frame rate to 144, and I turned on FSR without frame gen. And there's FSR 1, 3, XESS, but no DLSS at the moment. I would like them to put in DLSS, because that would come with DLAA, which is a nice sort of anti-aliasing. And the base options, TAA and FXAA, aren't great. In fact, the FXAA is pretty ugly. There isn't a huge number of PC options, but there's enough, for me. It seems relatively well optimized. First time through, no problems without upscaling. Second time through, it was going all over the place, like it'd go from 60 to 140, and anywhere in between that. really. And I would rather just have a locked frame rate without, shifting about. The game's graphics aren't great, and it looks like they focus more on the large number of characters instead of, fancy graphic things, which is smart, because that actually impacts the gameplay experience more than, higher polygon crates or some fancy lighting does. And it looks fine to me. The textures on the characters are good enough, the hair and all that sort of stuff, and more importantly than that, it runs well, for me. I also have two friends who tried it on PC. One of them was on the lower end side of things now, he's running on a 1060. He had it on a mix of medium and high, and he was at like 20 to 30 FPS, without upscaling. He could probably bump it down to all low and, put on like FSR on like performance, and could probably get closer to 60. The other friend was running at 1440p ultra wide, because this game does have ultra wide support, and he was on a 2070 Super, and he said his performance was fine too. He's also running on Linux, and he had some issues at first, but then he swapped to a different Proton build through Steam, and it worked great. If you understand any of that, fantastic. I don't, I'm just repeating what he said. I've never used Linux. There's also a Steam Deck setting in the graphics options, which is kind of funny that you can set it to that even if you're not on a Steam Deck. Anyway, one of the big complaints about Dynasty Warriors games has always been, the enemies just stand around doing nothing. And from those in the know, a more valid complaint, allies stand around doing nothing. Which is weird, because in Dynasty Warriors 2, the allies moved more and were generally more competent. Both issues have been touched upon in Origins, based on what I saw in the demo, which is, one level. Incidentally, there's 3 difficulty settings. I played on the standard middle one. Enemy troops, especially those with high morale, will attack far more frequently. They can do special charges and arrow volleys and the like too, but then you could break their morale, like if you capture a base, if you ambush them, kill the general, win a duel, they lose morale, eventually to the point they just kind of stumble and fall over and let you bonk them on the head. The ebb and flow of morale is far more important now, and is one of the elements I feel has been brought over from Wulong, as a matter of fact, along with a few minor elements of, the weapons, UI, and even gameplay. For example, there's a larger emphasis now on parrying enemies, dodging, interrupting their special unblockables with your own special attacks and all that. It gives a few Wulong elements to the DW experience, which I think is good. It makes the 1v1 experience more intense, whereas the 1v1000 experience, well, that's what we're all here for, right? If you're wondering, how is the gameplay? So every weapon has its own unique playstyle. The sword, the starting default weapon, has the classic Dynasty Warriors combat in the sense that you have a combo string, and each part of the string has its own heavy attack. So like C1, charge 1, charge 2, like charge 1's the aerial, charge 2's the multi-hit, charge 3's like the AoE, that sort of system. That's still here for the sword. Whereas if you go to the sort of greatsword equivalent, that's more like you hold the attacks, you charge them up individually. And then if you go to the Crescent Blade, one use Crescent Blade, that is more almost like Dynasty Warrior 6 Renbu system, where you have kind of like an infinite combo and you mix between the light combo and the heavy combo, but both are infinite and they sort of interplay with each other. Then there's also the wheels in the demo, which I didn't really try out much. And in the final game, we're also getting like spear, double axes, pike, and stuff. There's going to be 9 weapons total and each has their own unique gimmick. There's also, of course, Musou attacks, and true Musou attacks, and the God Musou Rage or whatever, which renders you invincible for a period. Very useful when fighting Omega Lu Bu. Man, Lu Bu in this game killed me more than Lu Bu in probably every other game he's been in combined, including Wulong. Been a while since Lu Bu's actually been kind of scary to fight. I also watched my friend on the 1060 fight him for however long it took him to beat him, and yeah, no, he's stronger now. Don't pursue Lu Bu, indeed. Aside from enemies, allies will move around and be more active now. If they have high morale, they may well win fights on their own, pushing forward to the other side of the map to support you like an ambush. If everyone gathers up, you can trigger a huge charge, showing off the new troop movements, or troop density, whatever. It's all been intensified, which is good, because the core aspect of DW is 1 versus 1,000 combat. The rush of, defeating a billion dudes all at once. The crowd density is good. The combats always needed to find a balance between moveset against the crowd and moveset against an officer. The addition of the skill system, which is similar to 9 Empires, helps with that. In fact, the skill system is almost identical to the system used in last year's Fate Samurai Remnant. Great game that I really enjoyed. Basically, as you fight, build up bravery. use bravery to unleash skills, and different skills require different amounts of bravery. Similar to this, you have your own unit, kind of like the bodyguard units from older games, and you can order them to unleash special attacks, charge, arrow volleys, things like that. This is where the game's progression comes in, leveling up skills, acquiring new items, accessories, weapons, treasures, and all that you can equip to your character to power them up. Remains to be seen how that's really going to pan out in the final game though, as we have a tiny selection in the demo. And it's worth pointing out the music. Dynasty Warriors has always had cool and unique music, and it looks like we're getting a good mix of remixes from the old games and new tracks. How the soundtrack turns out, wait and see, but I'm glad they aren't abandoning the series' traditional style of classic Chinese instruments and also like heavy metal or rock, however you want to describe it. Overall, the demo is promising. We need to see how the final game holds up, as it's only going up to 208 AD, which is funny because the Three Kingdoms era started in 221 AD. So this is a Three Kingdoms game which doesn't even reach the point of Three Kingdoms. But maybe that's where the Origins comes in. It's the origins of all the Three Kingdoms. Sure, why not? As for the relatively low number of weapons, characters, it remains to be seen what other modes the game will have and what sort of updates they'll plan. I would imagine this game receives DLC, and I think it will probably be extra weapons which will come with the characters. But hopefully, it'll be feature-rich at launch. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks so much for watching, see you soon. Hopefully my cough will be gone by next time. We hope.